Christianity, bows his knees, confesses his sins, gives his life to Christ. He says, this guy got down on his knees, confessed his sins, gave his life to Christ. And I'm hearing this, I'm going, wow. But then she says this, and I want you to know that that young man is the godliest man I have ever met. So in other words, it wasn't just like a conversion story, but how did it really bear out? But the fruit of the Spirit has been born in his life. Haven't met the guy, maybe I won't meet him again, since then, until heaven, but God is so gracious to do these things. And I think most of the stories we're not going to hear until we're there with him, and what a great thing that'll be.
Dr. Rosevere, is there a particular missionary biography that has impacted your life, or a missionary biography that you would particularly recommend for people?
Isabel Coons. I can't even remember the title any longer, but it was marvellous. Any of her books. Because I'm a slightly older generation than most of you, so I'd go back to Hudson Taylor, and if possible the original Hudson Taylor double volume. It's all the new ones, they really don't come up to scratch. Amy Carmichael, Anything's Come from Dohnavur.
I ask you too about being single and women who are single. I've just met a number of women who struggle in their singleness, and wonder if you could give any counsel on remaining faithful through the long journey and singleness, and how those two relate.
Those of you who are single and want me to say something else, you won't like what I'm going to say. But it is privilege. God has just been so good to me. And okay, there have been one or two occasions when it'd been rather nice to have had a husband. Not that I really wanted a husband. I wanted a man about the house to mend the chair leg when it broke. But quite honestly, the Lord Jesus has been my all-sufficiency all through. And it is a privilege, because as a single on the mission field, I was able to do things that I certainly would not have been able to do had I been married, had a family, and had responsibilities to a home. I was free. I could go into any African home. I didn't have to look first, is there a leprosy patient here which might take infection to my family? I could just go in. I didn't have to look at my watch to see that I got home on time to make the kids' evening meal. I was free, and God blessed that so richly. He gave me African sisters who've been closer to me than any blood sister ever was. I've had friendships with them on a level which I'm sure I wouldn't have had the same way had I been married. It's been privilege, and just keeping your eyes on Jesus. And I would just say, never allow anybody to suggest to you or say to you or even think about you that God gives you second best. God doesn't know the phrase second best. He's promised you his best. Okay.
That is more than okay. That is wonderful. Thank you. Next question for John and for Jerry. We've talked in the conference so far about our own death and enduring until the end, but I know that the death of people we love is a major hindrance, a major challenge for our own faithfulness. I think of people saying, if I lost a child, if I lost a spouse, if my mother died, I don't know how I could go on. How do you counsel people in those situations? I know you've each experienced situations of death of people you love very dearly. So how have you worked through that and remained faithful? And how do you counsel people in that sort of grief that challenges their faithfulness?
I'm, of course, more of a teacher than a pastor. In fact, I'm not a pastor at all, have not ever been, so I don't find myself in those situations very often. But I just come back to what I said this morning. We have to cling to the promises of God, that He said He will never leave us nor forsake us, and nothing can separate us from His love. And then that, along with 2 Corinthians 12:9, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And I'm actually walking along with a friend of mine whose wife died January the 1st. And so I'm sort of walking along with him this year. And those are the passages I keep bringing up to him, and that the fact that God does all things well.
I wasn't sure whether you were asking one of two questions, so let me take them both. How do you counsel a person who says, I don't know what I would do if my child died? That's one person, and the other one, their child did die. The first one, you have some time before it happens. And what you want to do as a pastor is build into their lives the kind of vision of God and His sovereignty and His goodness that gets them ready. I consider that one of my main responsibilities at Bethlehem, is to so preach and so teach and to so live as to prepare people to suffer. And suffering, the hardest kind, is losing what's precious to you, whether it's your own health or somebody else's life. So I think we who have any input into any people's lives, if they say something like that, that's a signal. It may be off the cuff, but it's usually a signal they don't have all the pieces in place yet, biblically, to settle their soul to say, I do know what I would do. I would throw myself on God. That's what I would do. Weeping my eyes out, I would throw myself on God and He'd be enough. That's what they would say. That's what I would do. If it's already happened, then you got the question of, well, where were they? Where are they theologically and spiritually? Are they angry at God, or are they despairing, or are they a rock? And you try to discern that as to the timing and the nature of your comments, but mainly you get your arms around people and you hold them until enough time goes by that there's enough, I don't even know what to call it. I don't want to say healing or steadying, but time is amazing in what it does to the horror of a moment. Time, an hour makes a difference. A day makes a difference. A week makes a difference. And a month makes a difference. And 10 years makes a difference. I spoke, and you'll hear this, I spoke with one man down here, and he said, tomorrow, he knows that my granddaughter, we did the funeral on Wednesday, this past, and he said, tomorrow is the 21st birthday of our stillborn son. And think of that. For 21 years, they've not known this baby, and they still mark the day because that's how long the pain can last. And yet, as he signified, it's a totally different experience today than it was then, and time has an amazing effect on that. So what you want to do with anybody is hold them up while that time passes. Hold them up. They may want to just run out in front of a car or throw themselves off a cliff, but you're going to grab them and you're not going to let that happen. I've got you. I'm for you. I'm your strength right now on behalf of Jesus. And you hold them long enough. Don't necessarily say anything. And then discerning what they need, you say things. And as a pastor, I have no canned speeches. Zero. I have no file system. Death of baby talk. Death of wife talk. I don't have any files like that. So when a man in our church lost his wife of about 36 years ago, maybe 5 weeks into it, I thought, perhaps today he needs a word. And I wrote a fairly long letter, about 3/4 of a single-spaced page, and just sent it to him. He calls me up and we go out to lunch. David may be here. We go out to lunch together, and he just pours out his heart at how significant that letter was. You know, most of the comfort ends after about